Welcome everyone to term 2 of our intercultural series. My name is EJ Bryn and I'm the Associate Director of Stakeholder Engagement at the BC Council for International Education. And I'm thrilled to welcome you to Placing Intercultural at the Core, a case study. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I live and work on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and it is my honor to invite Elder Latash Maurice Lehaney to open this term off with a welcome. Elder Latash.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Hot squile, Tanoyap, Tanoan Sayam and Siaya, Klachid Nomen on Hot and Squalin, Natha Uns, Latash Kushamin, Tanalachan, Ostahan Ochameo. Well, greetings to all of you, respected leaders, dear friends. I'm very happy to be with you this morning. On behalf of the Squamish Nation, I welcome you to the gathering today. I'm very honored to be a part of this gathering, having worked in international education with students myself in my past life as an educator. I recognize the challenges that are in front of each and every one of us in this field. I'd like to recognize and share with you that my great-grandfather came from Hawaii, seeking opportunity in a life in North America. And also I have an ancestor that came from Ireland. I just want to share with you that it takes courage, it takes perseverance to succeed in another country where there are different customs, but you bring with you a rich heritage too, and you have many strengths that you bring with you, and I hope you share those with us in your time here in Canada. Welcome everyone. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Latash. It's important that those of us who are settlers understand that these land acknowledgements serve as opportunities for us to affirm our commitments to supporting the process of reconciliation through our learning and our actions. Recognizing that many of us are logged in from all over, I encourage each of you to take a moment to look around and acknowledge where you are and the territorial histories of the lands you are on. We also welcome you to share your own land acknowledgement in the chat box as well. I'm just going to give you a few moments. So this is the 4th webinar in our intercultural series that runs once a month through May. You can find details about the past and upcoming webinars in this series, review the foundation modules, and learn about the certificate of completion we are offering through the series on our website. Along with changing our platform to Zoom for term 2, I would also like to note that we have extended the session for half an hour, and our webinars moving forward will be from 10 until 11:30. We made this change because of the feedback we received via our survey, and many people expressing the desire to have a bit more time for the Q&A at the end. So thank you to everyone who completes the feedback forms as we continue to improve our programming. On to a few housekeeping items. Now that we're on Zoom, there are a couple ways you can interact with us, but first I would like to say thank you for agreeing to our respectful workplace policy and for fostering a welcoming and growing respectful and safe environment for all. Microphones have been muted, but you can use the chat box, which several of you have already been using, for comments at any time if you want to speak to the panelists and the attendees. If you want to actually speak to the panelists and attendees, please make sure to use the drop down and send it to everyone. You can also use this to request technical assistance, and my colleagues Teralyn and Luke, who are joining from the back end, will assist you. Thank you, Teralyn and Luke, in advance. And we have some dedicated time at the end of the panel, like we usually do, for Q&A. We invite you to ask the questions throughout, and please, we encourage you to also upvote and add any comments to the questions that are already there, as this creates a more engaging environment. A reminder, please use the Q&A box for the Q&A and the comment box for the comments, so that we can ensure that everything is sort of in one place. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this series, Todd Odgers, Associate Dean of International at BCIT, who will set the scene for this webinar and introduce our speakers for today. Todd, over to you.
Thanks, EJ. Hello, everyone. And thank you very much, Elder Latash, for your greeting and your opening. And I think what we all need to do is to think about some of the things that you've shared and some of the things that EJ has shared here as well, and keep these in mind as we do our work going forward. And I'm really fortunate to play this role and to meet all these amazing people that are working in our field that are living in that intersection between international and intercultural education. And I'd like to just give a little bit of a summary. You know, this is session 4 that we've run since September. We worked with Kyra Garson, and Kyra helped us really to set the big picture stage, looking at some of the phases that we've gone through in the field and over the past few decades, and gave us a little bit of some light and look into what the future might look like, and what the kind of challenges are that we need to lean into. In October, Justin Wilson, Eduardo Contreras, and Darla Deerdorf spoke to us, and it was really interesting in this post Black Lives Matter summer. And they were looking at how can we, or what can we as educators do to design programs and initiatives that address the historical issues of racism and oppression that are so much a part of our work here, and the work that is part of our responsibility. In November, we had the charming Monroe France and Musa Magasa. We had experiences. They talked a lot about their experiences working around the world. And some of the frameworks, they had some frameworks that they shared to help us lean into the kind of challenges of creating an inclusive workplace, because they really believe, you know, if we have a healthy workplace and if our insides of ourselves as individuals is clean and healthy, and we've done the work of reflection, and then we're able to create better programs, more inclusive programs, and more inclusive experiences, educational experiences for our students. Now, this month, we're extremely fortunate to have a case study. And I think we were ready for a case study. We've looked at some ideas of like, okay, these are ways to lean into these challenges, but we wanted to have a case study. And this month, we have the Center for Intercultural Engagement at Langara College to talk a little bit about talk a little bit about their experience. And we're fortunate to have the Vice President External, Yusuf Baracha. We have Daryl Smith, the CIE, or the Center for Intercultural Engagement Director. And we have Carolyn Wing, the Intercultural Engagement Consultant at the CIE, representing the center and her colleagues. And the center represents Langara's commitment to strategically bringing education to its internal and external communities. And today we're going to discuss a little bit about the origins of the CIE, where it came from, what kind of work they had to do to get to this place where they are right now, the current state of things. There have been a lot of events that have happened over the past year to 2 years, and what are they focusing on, and what are they emphasizing right now? And then the third, we're going to look a little bit at, so what do the next few years look like? And what I really like about the panel that we brought together today is we'll get the perspective of 3 different seats and 3 different ways of looking at the operation. So I'm really excited to open it up and welcoming everybody to the screen. Where are you guys? I miss you guys. Oh, there you are. Hi. Welcome. I think that, Daryl, you're driving the bus, right? You've got the slides?
Yeah, I'm be driving the bus. I probably won't start with the slides right off the bat, but we'll have a little bit of a talk, and then we'll pull up some slides along the way.
Okay, great. And you know, so I alluded to that we'll have a few phases we'll go through, and then I'm really looking forward to some of the Q&A that we're going to have as we go through this session. But maybe I think we're starting with Daryl on this. Langara has been on a multi-year journey related to internationalization, intercultural development, and indigenization as well. And maybe can you, as a group and you individually, talk a little bit about, you know, how did you get here? What have you been working on?
Sure. That's an interesting journey. So I'll give you a little bit of a background about how we got here, and then pass it off to my colleagues to fill in some more of the details. So just a little situate us. We are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. That we've been given the name Snowaeth Lalem, which means house of teaching by the Musqueam people, and we're very proud to have that name, and we understand the responsibility of it, and we're learning how to honor the name that we've been given. So we're an urban campus. For those of you who don't know us, we're about 15 minutes from downtown by SkyTrain, so we're on a major transportation route. Just to give you a few of the numbers, last fall, so fall 2020, we had 14,000, about 500 students in regular studies and continuing studies. Just under 10,000 were domestic students, and just under 5,000 were international students. So we're sitting at about 33% right now. International students, or students who hold a study permit. So so that's where we are right now, but we have a story to tell as far as how we got to the Center for Intercultural Engagement. And you're going to see some changes and some movements through this as we get to the center, and so hopefully you'll see those pivot points as we move along. But I'm going to start way back in 2015. We had a rapid increase in international students at Langara. We saw this in departments that we hadn't necessarily seen it before. For example, I was teaching biology at the time. In the biology department, we would have 4 to 5 international students a year. And I think around 2015, most classes had about 33% international students. Wow. So a big jump. So that led to changes in the classroom that were unexpected in certain places. And we were wondering, how did we deal with that? And one of the things we looked at was consultation. And you mentioned Kyra, and Kyra was one of those consultants we brought in 2015 to say, okay, Kyra, what are some things we can do? And she talked to several people at the school and developed a roadmap for us. And at that time I said I was teaching biology, but one of the I guess the stops along the way was engaging faculty in this discussion. So my position, a position was created, and it was called the Intercultural Initiatives Coordinator. And I took on that role in May 2016. May 2016, so it was the Intercultural Initiatives Coordinator in the Teaching and Curriculum Development Center. So I went into the TCDC, as we call it. And the original push there was international students. It was this is what's going on in the classroom. What do we do, and how can we better understand what's happening there?
So that's because the perception was that the diversity that was being influencing the institution was all international students. That was right. The lens at that time. Okay.
That's right. So it was, okay, international students are here. There's diversity we haven't seen before, and there were probably smarter people who were thinking about this and got it right. But that was the initial perception. So the college was more than willing to take the biologists and turn them into an interculturalist transition, but they were willing to train and provide resources and mentors for me throughout that process, which has been key to some of the development we'll talk about as we go on here. So the initial push was international students, and so we developed resources. We started developing a student success course, and we developed lots of workshops on the intercultural classroom. Todd, you came in and helped with Kyra and Emma Barasa at that point. We engaged faculty in this work as well as staff and people from the student services side of the house to engage in this work. But as we're doing this, even when we're developing the student success course, it was, okay, is this for international students? Well, there's other students in the classroom. There's other things going on here. And so even though we started off with that impetus, we quickly realized that couldn't be the focus. There are other cultures here. There's settler cultures, there's domestic cultures, there's recent immigrants, there's Indigenous students in the classroom. And so even in the early days, I'd say, as we were developing this, we were looking at how do we develop a sense of belonging? How do we develop a sense of belonging in the school for all students and employees? So it started, there's not just cultural differences, diversity here in the students. We have employees as well that are representing that. So we started to expand our focus at that point in time, even in the first years that we were developing this. But as we were developing workshops and we had resources developed and things for students, there seemed to be a little bit of a lack of goals. Where were we going? Where's the strategic initiatives? How are we going to reach those? How would we measure what we've done? What was success? And so in that, we decided we needed some strategic development, some strategy. So around 2017, we implemented the development of an internationalization strategy. So we wrestled with that term actually, even at that time. Is it an internationalization strategy? Should we be calling it something else? And we settled on internationalization. We since changed, and we'll talk a little bit about that change as we've gone on. But it was the term we chose then, and I think that we've developed beyond that, and I'll relate a little bit about how that happened. So this started the process of developing the internationalization strategy was a collaborative process. We took it to SLT first, our senior leadership team, and the senior leadership team said, hey, this is something that is great, but we can't develop this. You need to develop this, as in the employees and the students at the college. So it took over a year, about a year and a half almost, by the time we started till the time we implemented. But we went to as many places in the college as we could. We identified 60 different departments or areas, from the bookstore to the biology classroom, and we were able to get in on meetings in about 40 different areas. So looking at, this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking about doing, this is how you can be engaged. We did surveys, we had world cafes, we did several attempts, and I think we were successful in engaging the community in this, because we knew that if we engage the community in the process, then the implementation of the faculty, staff, and students would also be engaged in the implementation of the process as well.
And Daryl, when you did that in various stages. So you started with a general idea, then it got more specific over time when you were doing those consultations?
Yeah. So what was important, that the theme we were looking at, and I think there was a admission that we may not have done it right to begin with. And so it was, let's imagine here, if we do this right, what does Langara look like? Yes. Right. So what are the things we need to focus on if we do this right? And so that was one of the key themes we were looking at. And so we ended up with a strategy, and we had 4 pillars of that strategy: student success and development. And in that student success and development included objectives like establishing an equity, diversity, and inclusion committee, creating a sense of belonging for the students. So that was the student development side. We had a pillar of intercultural development, or developing an intercultural dimension at the college, support for employees as we're going through this process. And the 4th one was a global citizenship. How do we develop global citizens in this process? So those are the 4 pillars that we came to. But in that time, so we ended about February 2019, so not too long ago here. In May 2019, we established the Office of Internationalization. which lasted a few months. The name lasted a few months. Because we were very cognizant of the fact that everyone associated us with international students. What are we going? You're the guys who are looking after international students, and we have a wonderful international ed department which does wonderful things with our international students and supports. But we needed to change that focus. We needed to see that distinction, that as we progress through this process, we were not just looking at international students, we were looking at all students. We were looking at employees. We were looking at a college that was situated within a community and was on unceded territory.
Mm.
So that our scope became much bigger. Our scope became bigger as we changed to the Center for Intercultural Engagement.
It's more inclusive too, that framing.
It's more inclusive in that framing, and it's more, and I think it's more interactive. We are engaging. How do we do this interculturally? It's not intercultural knowledge. It's not just intercultural skills. It's engagement. How do we engage in it with an intercultural understanding as we move forward?
Right.
So that gets us to probably summer of 2019. And I'm going to share the screen with you now, and I'm going to look at a little bit about some of the things that have happened since then. I'm going to relate to where we were. Let me just get the share screen up here. And I think we're here. Can we see that?
Yes.
Okay. So as we launched on internationalization, and we were making a pivot. There was a pivot going on here. This was the definition that we came at as we were going through our process of developing the strategy. And you can see it's Jane Knight and Hans DeWitt are here in full force. So it was internationalization is this intentional process to integrate an intercultural dimension into the way we do things and provide services at the college in order to enhance the educational environment for all students and employees while making a meaningful contribution. So that was great, and I think it was appropriate for where we were at the time. But I think now, as we look at several influences that have occurred over the last summer, definitely the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and social injustices that have happened throughout throughout the world. In Canada, racial injustice against people of color and Indigenous people has been, we see that they've been going on for a long time, but definitely I think we all can recognize that it's been brought to a point and much needed during this time. And as other influences have come in throughout the progression of the development of the center. I think of papers you've read or key moments that have kind of highlighted where we're going. In fact, one of the key moments I had near the beginning was I was able to one of the intercultural development programs I was at was with Janet Bennett. I know you know Janet, Todd, and she was talking about it. The workshop was called Intercultural Competence for the Overworked Educator.
Oh yeah.
So it was great. So I was going there to get to learn about intercultural, but she was talking about intercultural and where does that go? Where do we need to go to get to the intercultural? And it was social justice. Mm-hmm. So there was that push there. I remember being at Thompson Rivers at the Intercultural Intersection and hearing Dr. Ahmed, and he was talking about intercultural communication and social justice. And so there were themes that were coming in throughout. So I think we've been heading in this direction for a while, and we've included it, and we've seen it in different parts of our internationalization strategy, but we're pivoting. And so when we look at our definition here, we see things like who are we talking about? We're talking about all students. We're talking about employees. We're talking about our community. And when we start talking about all students, we need to start thinking about intersectionality. Yeah. We need to start thinking about LGBTQ. We need to start thinking about our recent immigrants. We need to start thinking about intersectionality with accessibility, students and employees with accessibility needs. We need to start thinking about the barriers that are created around first-generation students. We need to start thinking about the barriers that are created for our Indigenous students. How do we work with this to look at all? What does all mean? All of our students. And so I think the natural progression there was we have to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. That needs to be the focus.
Wow, and you know, I want to feed forward with what you're talking here because I just want to plant this later. I think maybe Carolyn will talk about this, but in my experience working with a center, you know, that had a similar mandate to the one that you've created here, making sure that you have the personalities and the expertises in your team becomes absolutely critical when you start talking about the complexities that you're now leaning into, right? So I just want to point that out. I think you'll probably talk about that.
Yeah, critical to the discussion is who's on the team, and so that's something we are we're developing our team, and we see that as we move forward, and we will be talking about that a little bit more. But yeah, for sure, who's in the center has been critical, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off from your line of thought there. So
no problem. Yeah. So but the other thing here, I think that we need to look at is in this definition is in order to enhance our educational environment. What does that mean? What is enhancing the educational environment? Does it mean better grades? Or does it mean a classroom that focuses on equity, diversity, and inclusion? Also, what does it mean to make a meaningful contribution to our community? And as I look at that, I think we have to think about as this meaningful contribution has to be social justice. So as we develop and we move further and we take what where we've come from and think about where we want to head, those are becoming themes. But we've almost done a flip, and we talk about it as the flip, where at one point in time, international student internationalization was driving our equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice. And now it's justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, which is driving our internationalization and other things we do around curriculum and support for faculty, staff, and students as we develop more programs. So it's going to change in focus.
And that's a senior leadership shift in thinking too, right?
It's a senior leadership team a shift for sure. We've always had great support from our senior leadership team, and there's some stories around that where I've gone to the senior leadership team individually, and I was talking to our VP of Finance, and I was always nervous when you talk to the VP of Finance, and so he was like, Daryl. I explained what we were doing, what we wanted to do. And he said, Daryl, I'm a straight shooter. And I thought, oh no, here's where you're going to tell me that it's a nice idea, but we have no money. But our VP Finance was like, this is the most important initiative we're doing at the college right now, or one of the most important initiatives we're doing at the college right now. So let us know what you need. And I was like, wow, that's great. And then, I mean, we have our president who's now talking Jedi, and we have Yusuf, who's been a huge support here. And we also
don't know what Jedi is, by the way, Lauren, Daryl.
Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. So we have that framework that we're working on. But we definitely have had our senior leadership team support, but we've also had our champions in the student services departments, and we have them on our team, and we also have our faculty champions as well. And we're going to hear a little bit about them. So we've had lots of champions. Our board of governors has engaged with us. I've had a chance to talk with them, and they are very supportive of what we're doing. So I think that kind of sets the stage of where we are. I think Carolyn probably will be able to take over here and give us a little bit about more what we're doing right now.
So that really helps us set up the context. So there was a heck of a lot of work getting to where we are now.
Yes, there was.
So this is not light work. I mean, you started in 2015. We're now in 2021. Mm-hmm. So, and I think one of the things, and I see Karina talking, praising you in the chat around like what great work. I just want, this takes time. And it takes resources, and it takes a vision, and it takes a commitment. And I think, I want to underline that. So folks that are listening to this conversation and thinking, wow, we would like to maybe consider doing something like this in our own institution, hey, call Daryl up. But it is not a small undertaking, and it requires like consistent working away. And I really applaud and appreciate what you've been able to accomplish as a group at the
Thank you very much. I think that's key, is that consistency through leadership changes as well. So leadership changes, and so it's keeping that, trying to keep that message in the forefront all the time. And I think we've had great people in leadership who've picked up that charge. So yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, and like you said, now we're sort of into the so what are we doing now phase, and I think is that where we get to hear a little bit from your colleague, from Carolyn?
Yeah, let's talk. Carolyn, I think, is going to take that on. She's been.
Hello, Carolyn. Where are you?
Do you see me? Am I on screen?
Somewhere.
Somewhere.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, okay. Hi.
There you are. Hey, can you tell us a little bit, okay, so you became involved with CIE. Can you talk a little bit about how that involvement started, what it's meant to you, and so what are you up to, you and your colleagues?
Sure, I'd love to do that. So Daryl, can you advance to the next slide, please, and click twice? Thank you. So Daryl has talked about how, from the center's perspective, we're coming from a social justice framework. And for myself, as an early childhood educator, as a special educator, I came into the Center for Intercultural Engagement with this perspective. Social justice in working with young children, I'm talking about children under the age of 5, and then in my role at the college, training the teachers to work with the children under the age of 5. We have within our provincial mandate and our framework, a social justice framework. So we are behooved to start to discuss social justice with young children starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's been a perspective that I've had in my career as an early childhood educator and a special educator for going on 25 years. So my shift, to the Center for my new career with the Center for Intercultural Engagement was exciting. I was at that point working within the Early Childhood Education Program and the Teaching and Learning Center, TCDC, as Daryl mentioned. And when he said, I think we're moving towards a Center for Intercultural Engagement and doing intercultural work, I said right away, I want to put my name up for that because I see doing intercultural work as just a piece of social justice, which Daryl, if you can click to the next. Thank you. So this is the framework that I work from and that the center is working from as well. So Daryl talked about how at the college we have a lot of diversity within our domestic and international students, so I won't belabor that. But then across the bridge, we also have, click please, Daryl, inclusion. And Daryl also mentioned this idea of how we're coming at the Center for Intercultural Engagement to the idea that part of our purpose statement is going to be that we want a sense of belonging for everybody. It's not enough that people just can show up and be included, but how can they be meaningfully included for all of who they are and every aspect of them. And then Daryl, click please. We see the bridge between diversity and inclusion being built through intercultural competence and intercultural education. And to be clear for us, when we talk about culture, it's not just national and ethnic culture. It really, again, embodies everything that a person identifies as in terms of culture or cultures. So their religion, their gender, sexual orientation, age, generation, ability. I always forget a few, but everything that anybody identifies as, we see as part of their cultural makeup and their identity. So we're not just looking at ethnic and national culture, but those intersectionalities that Daryl speaks of is really important to consider.
So you get to inclusion from your various diversities through intercultural engagement.
Yeah.
So develop education, curricular, co-curricular, these kinds of things help you get to a state of inclusion. Is this correct?
Right. Yes. So I'll hopefully have some time to go over some of the practical initiatives that we've been having with employee and student courses. But yes, exactly that. To get to that meaningful inclusion, we have to understand first our own culture and our own identities, and then others, and understand difference, and be able to appreciate difference, navigate difference, and respect difference. And then we can get to that meaningful inclusion, because people can show up for all themselves as different as we come, right? So then the next click, Daryl, is equity within this JEDI framework. If we have done our work and developed—
Carolyn, can I just stop you there one more
Please.
time? Just because there was a question in the chat and I just want to draw people's attention to it. Can you explain what JEDI means? Some people didn't understand.
Okay. So JEDI is what we're now using as an acronym for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. JEDI.
Thank you.
So we're saying Jedi warrior, you know, we're riffing on that a lot. So if we do our job and people are being able to navigate and understand and appreciate difference through that intercultural competency, then we can really start to look at the E in JEDI, the equity. Because equity does not mean equal, right? We've heard that from many of the panelists previously in these sessions. It means distributing resources that meet the needs of everybody in an inclusive way. So if we don't understand difference and we can't appreciate difference, we can't really get to equity. And then 2 more clicks, Daryl, please. So internally, we see social justice as encompassing anti-racism and decolonization. But we want to make sure we put this on the slide, because in this current point in history, we believe it's important to absolutely state this explicitly, that when we're striving for social justice, we need to decolonize, and we need to not just be not racist, but we need to be anti-racist as an organization.
So that's a big underline. You're underlining.
Big underline. Yeah. Which leads me to the next slide, please, Daryl. So Daryl mentioned that we have a partnership, special relationship with the Musqueam First Nation, and we hold that responsibility very dearly and importantly. But UNDRIP and the TRC calls to action are the other piece that guide our work, because we all have a responsibility as an education system, but also as individuals, to be able to move towards the calls to action. And the TRC does mention intercultural engagement, intercultural education as a piece of the calls to action. And again, it was, you know, Daryl talks about our history. It was back in 2015 when the TRC calls to action came out. Within the Teaching and Curriculum Development Center, we started doing some work around reconciliation. And it was our colleague, Justin Wilson, who for me was able to connect the dots for me around indigenization, reconciliation, and intercultural development and engagement. So shout out to Justin, and it was a really important movement for us as a team, I think, as well.
And we're very fortunate.
And when we
October, we're very fortunate. In October, actually, Justin was on the panel with Darla Deerdorf and Eduardo Contreras. So, you know, like, you're in good company.
Yes, I was there for that. And if we look at UNDRIP and the TRC, so in my other role at the college with ECE, Early Childhood Education, we had a federal grant a couple of years ago to start indigenizing our curriculum. So now we're in our third iteration of the courses that we've indigenized. And I'm learning now through this, and this now is also informing my work at the Center for Intercultural Engagement, that our domestic students are coming to us with a varied range of understanding around the genocidal history of Canada. And that variability will change more as more students are going through the system, education system, with the history residential school within their entire schooling. Then we have our international students who have come to Canada often because they hear that we are multicultural and we have multicultural policies. Then they come to my little ECE class and they find out that we have this very racist, colonial, and genocidal history, and it's a bit of a shock for them. But it also brings out for them the fact that just on the weekend, I was grading the first discussion post from the class, and the students were sharing how in their home countries, they were impacted by colonization as well. So I have students from Vietnam, from Korea, from India, who all talk about the impact of colonization in their home countries. And now they're understanding it from the Canadian perspective as well.
What a great conversation that must be in your classroom, bringing those multiple perspectives and experiences and discourses around that topic.
Mm-hmm. It's been incredibly informative for me, and just to watch the students start to put all the pieces together, it's been fabulous. And every semester so far, we've had at least one student, international student, who puts up their hand and self-identifies as being Indigenous in their own home country. And we weren't hearing those stories before. They would come, they'd be the student from X country, but they wouldn't identify as Indigenous in their own country. But now we're hearing that again from students from India, from China, from South America, Central America. So again, if we talk about inclusion, right off the bat, that helps them to feel that they are included when we talk about indigeneity. So yeah, all kinds of wonderful sort of side spokes coming out of this work.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So to get to your question though, Daryl, one more slide. What are we doing? How are we doing this work? So in the first planning meeting that we had with EJ and Todd mentioned that this work, and he said it again earlier, that it's heavy work, it's hard work, and it's going to take a long time. And he used the metaphor that it is like we are building a plane while we're flying it. So building a plane while we're flying it. And that stuck with me. And I was thinking about it and ruminating over it for the next week or so, and then started riffing on it myself. And so here you see on this slide a picture of the Wright brothers' first flight in 1907. And 1907, we're in full-on colonization in BC and Canada. The Indian Act has been around for 30 years now. Residential schools have been around for a long time. So it's also 1907, 1908, the time in Canada and BC where our first post-secondary institutions were being formed. And they were being formed as a mirror to colonization, to that in the UK, in Britain. Yeah. So if you even just look at our architecture, right? The early schools that we have that very English sort of architecture to them. Yeah.
That's also the time when we had the head taxes for the Chinese and Japanese immigrants happening at that time as well. That's
right. My grandfather is part of that group. So if we think about the Wright brothers and this airplane, and then we think about our colonial post-secondary institutions, I would adapt Todd's metaphor to say that we're not just building a plane as we're flying it, but that we're actually trying to deconstruct this ancient plane, this colonial plane, this racist plane, and rebuild it as we are flying it. Wow. And for some people, like for me, we're not going fast enough, right? And other people were going too fast. But how do we deconstruct a wing and move our resources around to get equity without going into a nosedive, right? But our post-secondary and our education system generally is part of the systemically racist and genocidal history of BC and Canada. So how are we going to navigate this flight from here on in? And who's in the cockpit? Who's flying it? How do we make the passenger area bigger and more inclusive so we can start to work towards equity?
Wow. Wow. Wow, thank you.
Thank you for starting me off on that tangential metaphor.
Wow. Yeah, you took that places. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Wow. So, Carolyn, I'm wondering at this point, Carolyn, so that's where you are at this moment. And I'm wondering, is it time for us to have, is Yusuf going to speak a little bit to his role in this now? Is that, yeah. Yusuf, are
Yes,
you
that
up
would be
there?
great.
Thank you very much, Todd, and thank you all for joining us today. Before I start, I just want to say first, thank you to Todd, and thank you to Elder Latash for opening and welcoming us all. And I thought it's also a good time to say thank you to EJ, Terralyn, and Luke for helping facilitate this. So, and to my colleagues, Carolyn and Daryl, thank you. It's an honor to be here because, as you all know, this is so important to me. Many of you may have heard me speak a couple times at BCCIE in the past, and everything I've spoken about really fits into this intercultural at the core. It's what we all believe, but thank you. The importance of placing intercultural at the core, we need to do this now, so it's part of our daily practice in all of our institutions. So I have a few points, Todd, that I was just going to mention about where things are going and what we're trying to do. And it's all about learning. So we see this intercultural at the core. We see the emphasis coming out more with our provincial government. Recently, Premier Horgan sent his mandate letters to his ministers on priorities that he would like to see coming out of the last election. And in his letter to Minister Kang, our Minister of Advanced Education and Skills Training, two key principles that are so important are noted, and those were furthering Indigenous reconciliation initiatives and also equity and anti-racism. This is incredible for all of us who are doing this work because now these are kind of our marching papers, kind of telling us this is an importance to the people of British Columbia, to our government. I know all of us have been working in this arena for a long time, years before us, but now you're starting to see things very concrete. We need to move forward on these initiatives. It's now that we need to do it. And COVID has brought this to the attention, and now we need to actually go forward to make a systemic change. So we have seen this emphasis and direction coming from other organizations. For a lot of us who are doing research, the federal Tri-Council funding agencies. This is helping us at Langara, Snoweth Leum, to help us build momentum in the work we're doing around intercultural equity, diversity, anti-racism, and especially with our Indigenous initiatives. We have a blueprint, a foundation that we need to move forward. So as this has become more of a priority for us at Langara, I've been asked by senior leadership team, and especially our president, to move these initiatives within the external portfolio. It is a big, as you said, it's not easy to do overnight, but there's a strong foundation here. We've got, as you mentioned also, Todd, about we have experts who are doing this work. How do we take what they're doing and move it into the right direction for the systemic change needed for us to feel that we're listening to the voices across our campus and within our communities. So as Daryl and Carolyn mentioned, the Center for Intercultural Engagement has been tasked and gone through an exercise to develop a new vision and mission statement. What are they doing? What are they trying to do at the college? How do we get the voices and those power dynamics and ensure that people are coming to the table? So the goal is for CIE, Center for Intercultural Engagement, to help facilitate and lead these kind of conversations underway at the college, especially around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, JEDI. So these conversations that are happening within the college involve students, staff, faculty, administration, and we're hoping to open this up to other institutions and to the community at large. This is about learning and moving forward. Not easy conversations. So all of you who are doing this work, you know, my heart goes out to you because you know how important this is and you know how difficult a lot of these conversations are for our community. So how do we do this in the right way? The college is going through a visioning strategy, and we're planning sessions to define how we're going to address JEDI development. So the work that CIE is undertaking right now is more important than most people understand, because what it's doing is helping us with Langara with our new identity. And I've just mentioned to the group just before, we are working on our new strategic plan, This wording is so important because it's in there. The work of our faculty, our students, and everyone are going to see that this is a priority and this is important to move forward. That is probably the most important thing, is to see this in our strategic plan, our academic plan, and all the other plans that we use will have this language. So where are we right now? So the work is starting to take shape for me, and along three key directions. The first is about changing the culture of Langara and making it an environment that prioritizes these JEDI principles. What we're all going to run into right here is a cultural shift, a cultural change. And how do we do this? So part of the work is to create a safe space where we can try to engage others in a dialogue where people come together and feel it's okay to make mistakes. We need to make mistakes in a safe space, but we need to correct those mistakes and move forward. And that's what we're doing. So this plane analogy that you've been talking about for me is even more important because we're in the air. It has to be a safe space. But at the same time, we need to make and modify and change because this is the expectation communities have for us. So,
and Yusuf, can I underline that? I really like what you just said about the creation of a safe space. That's a real, what I really appreciate, there's a couple things about what you're talking about here, and I just want to underline them for the audience. A is that vertical integration. You have everything from the ministry down to senior leadership, and then coming, so there's, in the old days, this was a nice to have where people would have off the side of their desk, they would run training and initiatives, but it wouldn't really line up to anything of substance. Now you're in a situation where we are committed to this, and we also are committed to know that we're not all going to say the right thing perfectly all the time. We need to have a safe space where we can learn and maybe trip once in a while. I really applaud that.
And thank you. And as you could tell, I'm passionate about this work. You know, I've got children, I've got, you know, we all have our children. We want to make sure that they have the opportunities that they need too. So we started thinking about how do we make that change, that cultural change at the college. So one thing that we're doing is to create a safe space is we've created a JEDI lab, and we're doing it within the external portfolio. The portfolio that I'm in, it's growing and growing and growing. So there are a lot of folks there, but why not make this a lab? And that lab is being spearheaded by Daryl and with Teresa Brooks, who many of you know. And they're going to develop working definitions across the portfolio about what JEDI means to each of us, and to come up with principles to help guide us on our everyday practices and principles and relationships. How do we want to treat each other? How do we want to be treated? How do we ensure our meetings are taking a different form? You know, all of this is really even changing the way I think. You know, I know in the beginning, my introduction and my title is VP External Development, but development sometimes gets lost in revenue generation. So we've dropped that development because we don't want to be seen that way. It's developing programs, but we're not just here for revenue. So you see the changes are happening. The second direction is ultimate goal is around making systemic changes. We're starting to do this. And to me, one of the biggest wins was our VP of Human Resources, called People and Culture at Langara, asked Daryl and the CIE team to be part of a process to review the language in our policies and practices, and to ensure that they're free of bias, their tone, and any discriminatory, wording that may exist right now. That is big in the fact that people are seeing that change is needed in our policies, and this is changing those systems within the college that are discriminatory to some degree.
That unconscious bias that's built into us as human beings, but also built into the system that leads to discrimination.
Exactly. And I think, we can talk about interculture, but we need to do things that are about moving us forward and the change. And that's what we're trying to do. The third direction is strengthening our relationships with communities outside the college, making sure that any changes we're making are in dialogue with those external community members, those important voices. For example, we're working extremely close with Musqueam and other nations to develop our reconciliation initiatives. We want to make sure that we're supporting the communities and our students. but at the same time, not inadvertently creating additional barriers for them. It's really important that we do things in a respectful way. So you will see more of that. One of the guiding principles that I want to keep in mind is probably the most important thing for me to really showcase is the work that we're all doing today is not about reaching a final destination or achieving a final goal. Social justice, in many ways, is a living thing, and it continues to change and evolve as we change as a society, as individuals, and as our frameworks and our institutions shift. I really need that to really be highlighted because it constantly changes. Even the terms we're using today might not be the terms we're using tomorrow, and we need to understand that. So for me, the work is to stay current, to stay attentive to the needs of all our community and the changing demands of institutions, and adapt our strategies and goals as we move forward. So I think what I'm trying to really say is these units like CIE, you know, that can start the conversations and this work so that systemic change happens, and also continue to have these dialogues is so important for us in our wider society. What happens at the college doesn't happen in isolation from other communities and the wider world. When we start to make changes here and help this to have a ripple effect, we can see that this will extend beyond Langara to our government, to others, to say, this is what we really believe in. So I just want to end there because I just want to applaud the work that all of you are doing and coming to learn about this, because this is more important now than ever.
Yeah, its time has come. It's overdue. Thank you so much, Yusuf, for that. And I'm wondering, Daryl and Carolyn, I think you have some pieces that you'd like to contribute that are part of the specific aspects of the going forward, and some evidence, I believe, of some impacts that you've been making.
Yes, we do. Carolyn's going to show us a few of the initiatives that we're undertaking right now. I think you're there, Carolyn.
I think I'm here.
Okay,
can you click to the next slide? There we go. So Todd mentioned the fact that having a team is really important. Here's our CIE team currently. So just shout out to this fabulous team. We've only been, I think Daryl mentioned, we've only been a team now for less than 2 years, 18 months or so, and adding people on as we go. So we are really just still storming and forming. We're in no near way norming. So
we just to add a bit to that, we have never met together face to face as a group because of the current situation. So it's presented challenges, but we've been able to accomplish many things through that.
The next slide, I think, are some of the lessons that we're learning.
I can go through a few of these. So we need champions, and we've talked about this a little bit more. With budget and financial support always helps move things forward. It's required. Governance, we have a director, an AVP or VP level, selecting the right people. We definitely, since the beginning, I think we've been talking about this, where faculty have been part of this group. We also have people from student services. Teresa Brooks is part of our team as well, and others have joined. Development and implementation must be grassroots. So it was, I think this was one of the key parts from senior leadership team. It wasn't, okay, we're going to develop a plan and you guys are going to implement it. Is what's the plan look like? And so I think as we move forward with equity, diversity, inclusion, and we look at justice included in there too, this is what we're going to have. Time, patience, and lots of consultation. I think, yeah, 2015 was a while ago, and we're still developing, and we will be developing for a long time to come. Be intentional, purpose, vision, strategic plan. As Yusuf mentioned, as we are looking at a change in direction, we're also looking at our purpose statement and our goals and our objectives and our mission right now, working on that as a team. And the last one is collaboration. I'll talk a little bit about that. We are working on collaborations right now. We have a partnership as far as decolonizing education abroad, working on with KPU and Kara Bertrand and Douglas. Sorry, not KPU, University of Fraser Valley. Sorry about that. As well as with Douglas College.
Is this the CICAN funded?
Our
mobility?
one of our
Yeah.
CICANs, yeah. So with Brian Story there and others at that institution. So I think some of the collaborations we've been able to start, we've also been working on collaborations around collaborative online intercultural learning or virtual exchange. And I think we'll get a chance to see a bit of that as well. So some of the lessons we're learning here are, there's others, but some of the key ones I thought we'd point out now. Carolyn, do you want to talk a little bit about the COIL program?
Sure.
Does that fit,
Yeah.
Todd?
Oh, great. Yeah, that's awesome. I was hoping that you were going to maybe, I think that you're onto something with the COIL program. So.
Okay, I'll just there.
All right.
There we go. Yeah.
And just before I jump into the COIL bit, I just wanted to mention in our internal navel gazing and figuring out our own purpose statement, we're trying to do model EDI through EDI. So we're looking at how we make decisions within CIE in a more lateral and less hierarchical way. All these sorts of things we're really looking at being able to implement ourselves so that when we're walking the talk, basically. So COIL is one of the initiatives that we have, we're now probably in our 4th iterations of in the last couple of years that has been very, very exciting and successful. So
and
COIL,
some people won't know what COIL is, so maybe, yeah.
Yeah. COIL is collaborative, online, intercultural learning and virtual exchange. So in COIL projects, we have a faculty at Langara working with a faculty from another institution internationally to come up with a problem-based assignment for both of their classes. And then both of their classes work together and collaborate online to solve a problem together. And I think Luke is going to put up the Langara website link to our COIL description, so you can read more about it that way. But right now we have COIL projects going on with institutions in Mexico. We just finished 2 classes with a post-secondary institution in China, which was amazing for both countries' classes and informative. And we're about to embark on one in the fall with University of Kabul in Afghanistan. So our Langara faculty in social work will be working with a faculty in Afghanistan in counseling psychology, talking about and thinking about childhood trauma. So it's just so exciting. And the next slide, Daryl. The 2 projects that we've got going on that are now in their 2nd iteration are one with Penn State and our recreation management program at Langara. And I think Luke will put in the link to this as well in the chat. But Yu Cheng, who is the instructor at Langara in recreation management, has put together an entire website to explain COIL and the COIL assignment to both the Penn State students and the Langara students. And they're looking at doing a project around the Penn State professor is in rehabilitation and human services. So the 2 classes are going to be collaborating to create manuals around leading practices for managers regarding mental health, issues around employment settings and current topics in American and Canadian society. So lots of discussion will happen there, I'm sure.
Carolyn, can I ask you a question? There is the group that started COIL, was that SUNY in New York? Who was it? I forget. Because they have a helpful website for people that are at the very beginning, and then when they get to looking at yours, it gives them some context of where it came from, and then like how you're innovating on it.
Yeah, we've been. Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, SUNY's definitely one of the schools that started this work, and they've got some great resources there. we've been working with Greg Tuca, who is does Going Global. He's been
Okay.
our person to work with and facilitated some of our discussions. Yeah, SUNY is definitely a good place to start if you want to think about this, or feel free to connect with us as well.
Well, I'm not saying not to go to you, but I'm saying they had a nice website that it helped me to understand how you're innovating on this approach. And I really appreciate being able to see that evolution, and also the localization, because you're making it local to your context here as well.
Yeah, we were fortunate to have this pre-COVID. So when we started development of it, before our classes went online, so we've been thinking about it for almost 2 years now. I think was our first iteration of this. So it's we've gotten a bit of a foundation under us as far as the work goes.
I have one more example to show you for COIL. The next slide, Daryl. So our faculty in Latin American Studies, Jesse Smith, has been working with a university in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And again, they're about to start their second go around. And they're looking at interculturalism and art for social change from a gender perspective. So this is a screenshot of the Padlet work that the students did around femicide in the Americas. So yeah, so powerful. And then I think Luke's going to put again the links to the other Padlets that the students created. They did projects around Indigenous women's rights, LGBTQ rights in Argentina and Canada, abortion in Canada and Argentina, the Me Too movement in both countries, and then Musicians for Change. So very, very powerful. I just get goosebumps when I see this image and think about the work the students have been doing. And then I just have a couple more slides. I know we're going to get into the questions, but I wanted to also highlight another piece of work that we've been doing. Oh, here's a testimonial from a student who's been working with the Argentinian class. And then next slide, Daryl. So the other piece that we just wanted to highlight that our team's been working so hard on are 2 pieces of training for employees and also for students. And we purchased from SFU, their Effective Intercultural course, the good work of Heather Williams, and then we started to adapt it. And again, we have a student-facing course, and we have a faculty, or an employee-facing course. Next slide, Daryl. So for both of these courses, we focus on 4 I's. And the I's are intercultural, indigenization, inclusion, and intersectionality. And the student-facing course we're calling 2IQ squared, because when you take the 4 I's, they're more than just their sum. They are exponentially more when you intersect them all and learn about them together.
Cool.
So with the student-facing course, we've embedded it into our academic program. So the rec program who are doing the COIL courses, the students do 2IQ squared before they meet up with the Penn State students. And so we're hoping to do that more with the
Wow.
And for the, next slide, Daryl. There's a student testimonial about, we're also using 2IQ squared for our student leadership. So for our students who are volunteering, and also for our student employees. And then for the employee-facing course, next slide, Daryl. We have 4 phases of intercultural engagement courses for employees that will constitute over 100 hours of work that the employees will have to engage in around this. And we have 4 phases. Right now, the first iteration of phase 2 is halfway through. And for phase 2, they're getting up to that 50-hour mark. There are 2 deliverables. And I just wanted to highlight the deliverables. One deliverable is that the employees are asked to create, by the end of the training, an inclusion story. And they can represent this any way they like, through a song, through a PowerPoint, through an essay. And this faculty from the photography department created a story along with photos. And the idea around the inclusion story, again, when we get to meaningful inclusion, we want to be explicit about it. The idea for the inclusion story is that if a faculty is introducing themselves to their class, either face-to-face or online, they can include their inclusion story. So right off the bat, the class knows this hopefully is going to be that safe place that Yusuf is speaking about, because we're explicitly working towards inclusion. And for, again, our other employees that are not faculty, if they're working in IE as advisors or at the front counter at RES, again, they would be able to work in their inclusion story so that we develop that sense of belonging, inclusion with our community right off the bat.
There's something I want to just draw to your attention. We're at about 11:10 and we have a few real great questions in here. I just want to make sure there's enough time for Q&A.
Okay, last slide then. The second deliverable is that we ask the employees to come up with an intercultural engagement plan, recognizing that this is hard work and it's going to take a long time. So I'll leave it at that and go to questions.
Oh, great photos too. Yeah, this has been, wow, what a journey you've been on. I think judging by the traffic in the chat, and having done some of the other ones, this is a very active chat in this one. And some of the questions there's some really great questions here, and I wanted to deal with some of them. So thank you everybody so much for what you've shared to this point. And what I'll do is I'll share a question with you, and please feel free, whoever you are, to maybe address it. The first one, I think we'll start with one that's a little bit more straightforward, and then I'll get to a little bit more, maybe a little more technical one. The first one is, in terms of the representation on the CIE consultants as CIE team consultants, are they faculty members? Are they senior leadership? This comes from Sydney. Who are they?
I can speak to that. So we have faculty members who, so I'm looking at the picture here to make sure I get everybody in. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 faculty members. And so each of the faculty members besides one teaches in their department. So they're half or to 3/4. So faculty members, we have 2 administrators joining us from our English language program, and we also have Teresa Brooks, who isn't on the payroll, but definitely spends a lot of time with our groups and has been very helpful for us. We have a project assistant, Daniel, which keeps us all together, and make sure we stay on task. And we also have a communications officer that works with us, Lynette Hawksley. So that's the team right now. We are about to hire one more. So Natalie Knight is also on the team. So she doesn't teach in a faculty, but she was. We created a position for her to come over to us. I don't like the term stealing from other departments, but so Natalie is now working with us in, she was in the Teaching and Curriculum Development Center, is now with us. So she's not teaching faculty, but working with us as well. And we're hiring for one more position. A faculty member will lead a SWOT analysis on anti-racism at the college. So we're hoping to have that new position filled by the beginning of the month, or maybe the end of this month if we're really lucky. So that's the makeup of the team right now. So lots of faculty representation, but we also have admin and others as well.
Yeah, good. So there's a very large faculty representation on that team. And David Brooks asked the question with regards to like international students. They have their own adaptation challenges and struggles when they're moving into our context. And he was wondering, is there what is the challenge, or is it a challenge getting them on board with social justice issues, thinking of Black Lives Matter, etc.? Yusuf.
I'm happy to jump in. It's really, I mean, we're starting to look at things a lot differently. We're learning a lot from CIE on how to do our work. And part of this new strategic plan we're doing is really around this social justice. So how can we really work with CIE to get this kind of information to our students and get them involved in these important discussions? Because it's all about being inclusive. So I think you are seeing a lot of these conversations are happening, but how can we formalize it so it's part of our programming and what we do? One thing that I'm hoping to do and work with CIE team and across the portfolio is to create a social responsibility group of both international and domestic students where we could come in and have more discussions. Eventually when COVID allows us, we can meet for a breakfast or whatever it is to kind of dive into these conversations and dialogue. So you're going to see more of this happening at the college. One thing that I've talked to with the recruitment team is how do we ensure that part of our welcoming messages is now going to include, working with our Indigenous communities. So that's going to be a big part of it. But how do we bring in other groups? So what we learned from Carolyn and Daryl, one is start implementing it within the portfolio. It's going to change the way we recruit. It's going to change the way how we work with students, our retention techniques, all of that. So like I said earlier, this is the start of these conversations. And in order to get, we can't just keep talking, we need to do things. So you're going to see that more implemented in our daily practice.
Yeah, and sounding like the project that you're doing around mobility and Indigenous students too, with you're looking at mobility too, like where our students will go to as well. Are you, there's two, I'm going to start with maybe a quick nugget question, and then I'll go to another deeper one. The quick nugget one is from an anonymous attendee who's asking whether there's an opportunity for a small private college to participate in something like this, or like to get involved with you.
I see Yusuf nodding, so yes, there is. Of course, there is. Yeah, I think collaboration is key, and so there's lots of good work happening. So if people want to get in touch with us, I think our information should be around somewhere. But dsmith@langara.ca, and we're happy to engage and talk and have that conversation for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah, more people in the boat. And there's a question, one of the first questions I want to, what happened to that first question? Sorry.
While you're looking for that, Todd, I might say in terms of partnerships with other institutions, the last COIL training that we did with Greg Tukey, we had other institutions part of that group. And we're about to start a new training. And we're also, I think, Daryl, right, we're open to having other institutions being part of that training as well for COIL.
Yeah, for sure. We had somebody from Capilano and somebody from TRU, I believe, in the last one, I believe. Yeah, so there's
KPU.
We're developing the program, and the next iteration will have a faculty member who's developed this, Yu Cheng Chang. We've seen some of his work leading that, but we're open to having other institutions come and join us for that. I think it would be it makes it more rich when we get those conversations happening between institutions. And we're also the last round of the training we did, we had the partners in the training as well as the Langara and other faculty. So we had that international component in the training while it was going on, and so able to work with your partners throughout the development of the program was great, and we'd love to continue to do that component of it.
I want to try and fit in two quick questions in about 3 minutes, if we can do that. And then I know that EJ will close out the session. One is continuing, I'm going to continue on the COIL theme. It can contribute to mitigating carbon emissions. This is from Lisa Brunner. As well as inequities about who's able to travel. Are these things that you are factoring into your thinking?
Yeah, 100% on that. It's that the carbon emission, great, but that equity piece. So we are able to give an international experience to a student in the classroom for the cost of the tuition of the course. So I think that's in the past, if you've got to travel to this country to get that, or someone's coming here. But in this case, we're doing that for 20 to 25 people in a classroom. We have smaller classroom size at Langara, but that's a huge equity part. You don't have to travel. Hopefully we'll be developing other equity parts so we can do that, but other opportunities for students to travel as well. But the carbon emission is obviously a bonus of this as well. Yeah, for sure. I don't know, Carolyn, anything to add there?
No, other than, you know, thinking about that airplane, right? And who gets to go on that plane. And after completing the COIL projects, now these students have an international connection and that they maintain. So again, it leads to other opportunities as well. But I really love that question. Thanks.
Yeah, relationships are being formed. Yeah, and the last question that we have here is from Jan Schmidt. And I think this will round us out for the day. She's asking, is there a structure that's used for staff to create the intercultural engagement plan? So is there what is the structure, or is there a structure? I think you talked a little bit about that, but do you want to talk a little bit about that a moment?
Sure, I'll start, and Daryl, you can jump in. So the 100 hours of intercultural engagement certificate course that we have is for all employees, so faculty and non-instructional employees as well. So they can, as part of their work, or engage in all of the workshops and work towards their certificate. Daryl, do you want to add to that? You're muted.
I was trying so hard not to have somebody say that today, but oh well, that close. But is there, what's the structure of that, I think is the question to me. Is there, how do we engage with that? That sounds right? Yeah.
And just to add to that, one thing that you know, I'm working on, and I'll really work closely with Carolyn and Daryl, is, you know, we're reshaping and relooking at our whole international and domestic model of recruitment and opportunities for students. But in there, we want to provide opportunities for all employees, faculty, and our other employees and staff, support staff, all of us, to get these experiences. So there is some funding opportunities where we can work. We just need to come up with a program, and then we will actually be able to put some funds aside for people who are interested to learn more and develop more. And for those that can travel internationally, great. But it's not just about traveling internationally, it's about taking those intercultural and those programming you're at home. And that could be working within Indigenous communities or whatever communities. So it's something that I've already looked at on how to fund. I just need to develop the framework and work really closely with Carolyn and Daryl to see how could we roll this out in a respectful way that keeps the conversation going. So that's happening right now.
That's one more part of that plane that has to be built. So yeah, thank you, Yusuf. What I want to do is, I think what we're going to do is transition over to EJ, but I want to say thank you very much for a very informative and fulfilling interaction with all of you. And it was a real pleasure. And now we go over to the hostess with the mostess, EJ Brim.
Thanks. I also want to reiterate, thank you so much, Yusuf, Carolyn, and Daryl. I really feel like there were a lot of rich resources that you shared. And also thank you in advance for being willing to share your contacts so people can reach out to you for more information. There were a lot of questions in the chat box around whether we will be sharing sort of the slides and some of that information. We will be sharing that out in our follow-up email. So don't worry, you didn't have to be frantically writing notes down and clicking all the links as they went through. And so Todd, also thank you for being our moderator and guiding the journey today. Thank you to our panelists one last time. And just a reminder that our 5th webinar is going to be on February 23rd. And it is our keynote speaker, Minnie Jean Brown-Trickey, and it's going to be really engaging. And I'm really excited about this webinar. So please be sure to register and check it out on the 23rd of February. And to everyone out there, have a safe and healthy day, afternoon, or evening, and see you next month.